Sometimes you find them driving down the road. Sometimes you find them sitting in somebody's driveway. Sometimes you find them in the backyard. But yeah, the search is a blast. Going out and looking and seeing what you can find, it's cool.
There is a car sitting in Danny Koker's garage right now that no one has touched in 30 years. Not because the crew cannot fix it, but because Danny will not allow it. That car once belonged to his father, and after he was gone, everything around it stopped moving. The shop kept running, the show kept airing, and millions of people watched every week without any idea what was actually happening inside it. What was really going on inside that garage while 9 seasons of television unfolded outside it? And why did the truth behind it leave even the people closest to Danny Koker completely silent? Join us as we find out what they found in Danny Koker's garage. The shop had a secret. On February 17, 2008, Daniel Nicholas Koker Sr. died in Las Vegas. He was 74 years old. He had been a Green Beret stationed in Germany, a baritone singer who, according to family accounts, shared stages with Johnny Cash and Mahalia Jackson, a pianist who toured the world with a televised Christian ministry that broadcast to millions, and a man who built 2 television stations from scratch without ever slowing down long enough to let any single thing define him. His son Danny was 43 years old. He was already running Count's Customs, already playing in a rock band, already building the brand that would eventually land him on national television. The crew he had built around him had been there for years, among them Ryan Evans, a painter from Killeen, Texas, who had been laying down finishes in that shop since 1999. On paper, everything was fine, but his father was gone. And the man he had been quietly building all of this for, the man whose standards had shaped every decision Danny ever made, was no longer there to see any of it. Danny Sr. had not been a distant figure in his son's life. When Danny was 8 years old, his father gave him a toy car. When he was 11, his father put him on stage at Carnegie Hall as part of the family singing group. His summers were spent in Detroit, Michigan, surrounded by relatives who worked at Ford Motor Company, where learning to strip an engine was just part of growing up. By the time Count's Customs opened in the late 90s, the name already had history behind it. Danny's father had launched a local Vegas TV station called KFBT in 1989, and it was on that station that Danny had spent more than a decade hosting a campy horror movie show, playing a vampire biker character called Count Cool Rider. Cape, dark humor, cult following, and everything. When it came time to name the shop, the character stuck, and Las Vegas already knew the name. When Counting Cars premiered in August 2012, Danny had been running that shop for over a decade, without a single camera in sight. He had not set out to become a television personality. The producers of Pawn Stars were regularly buying cars through the pawn shop and needed someone who could assess them on camera, someone who actually knew what a rusted classic was worth, down to the last missing part. Without hesitating, a crew member sent them to Count's Customs. Danny walked in, did exactly that, and the History Channel eventually gave him his own show. 6 episodes became 9 seasons, and at its peak, 2.8 million people watched every episode. The cars were never the show. The people were. Every customer who walked through the door carried something, a widow who had no idea what her late husband's Cobra replica was worth, a son trying to restore the first car his father ever owned, a couple who needed a beat-up old truck turned into a tribute to the store their family had run for 50 years. Danny handled every one of them the same way, and his crew had seen it long before any camera crew showed up. But while 3 million Americans were watching the garage every week, something was happening inside it that none of them could see. Not on the floor, not in the builds, not in any argument between Danny and Horny Mike over a paint job. It was happening in the books, and the person running it had been sitting 10 feet from the shop floor the entire time. So who was this person? And how did someone manage to steal from one of the most watched garages in America for years without a single person noticing? The man in the back office. In June 2013, a staffing agency called Randstad Professionals sent a man named Joseph Frontiera to Counts Customs. Randstad was a Delaware-based firm that placed workers in businesses that needed qualified staff quickly. Joseph came in as a financial manager, handling payroll, invoices, tax payments, and account oversight. The back-office engine that kept everything moving while Danny focused on what he actually loved doing, which was finding and fixing cars. Nothing about Joseph's arrival raised flags. He was not memorable or charismatic. He never appeared in a single episode of Counting Cars. He was the man in the collared shirt behind the closed door, working with numbers that nobody else was watching closely enough to question. What Randstad had allegedly known and chosen not to disclose was that Joseph had a prior criminal history of embezzlement and fraud from a previous employer. A staffing agency recommending someone for a financial role is supposed to surface that. They did not. He had done this before. He walked into Counts Customs already knowing exactly how the scheme would work. That invisibility was the plan. He just needed access to the accounts, and within weeks of being hired, he had it. The fraud started small enough to be invisible. A false invoice here, a redirected payment there. Joseph created dummy vendors, billed them against Counts Customs accounts as though they were legitimate business expenses, then funneled the money back to himself. The amounts were kept small on purpose, small enough that no one running a busy shop would stop and question them. When no one noticed, he went bigger. When no one noticed that either, he went bigger again. At some point, Joseph got comfortable enough to stop being careful. He used more than $75,000 of company money to fund a life he had not earned, a personal Range Rover, and airline tickets for private trips around the country. Money that was supposed to pay the crew, buy parts, and keep the shop running. He also had rubber signature stamps made, Danny's full legal name and Kevin Mack's name, which he used to authorize checks whenever neither of them was around to sign. He was not just stealing from the shop, he was signing for it, using Danny's name and Danny's money while Danny was out on the floor building cars. The company's taxes went unpaid, the IRS noticed, and an $18,000 penalty landed on Counts Customs for delinquent filings that Danny did not know existed until an outside accountant reviewed the books in late 2018. Danny filed suit against Joseph and went after Randstad too, arguing that placing a known fraudster in a position of financial authority without disclosure was a failure that belonged to both of them. The case moved through the courts, and Joseph was found liable, 1 year and 1 day in prison. Danny said justice had been served. But a court verdict does not give back what was actually lost. The money that was supposed to keep his father's name alive, the payroll, the parts, the daily cost of running the shop Danny had built in his memory, had been quietly disappearing for years into a life that had nothing to do with any of it. While the real story was playing out in a courtroom, the internet had already written a completely different version of it. And the person it chose to blame had nothing to do with any of it. So how does an innocent man end up in a fake mugshot seen by millions? The internet took over. Ryan Evans had been painting cars at Counts Customs since 1999. He started in his parents' garage in Killeen, Texas, relocated to Los Angeles to sharpen his skills, and eventually found his way to Danny's shop in Las Vegas. He was there for every season of Counting Cars, every build, every argument with Horny Mike over a wet door panel, as much a part of that shop as the lifts on the floor. In 25 years at that shop, Ryan had not stolen a single thing. When the embezzlement story started leaking out of the courts and onto the internet, the crowd went looking for a face. They needed someone recognizable, someone whose absence from the show could be framed as suspicious, someone visible enough to accuse and not prominent enough to fight back. They landed on Ryan. A fabricated image appeared on a Facebook group for reality TV gossip. Ryan's face, an orange jumpsuit, and a caption claiming he had stolen $70,000 and that Danny had covered it up. The image was entirely AI-generated. It looked real enough to be shared without hesitation. Within days, it had jumped from Facebook to Reddit to YouTube, picked up and republished by sites that never checked a single fact. A creator with over 1 million subscribers built a full video around it. A thumbnail featuring Ryan's fake mugshot next to Danny's face with a red X drawn across it. Millions of views. Danny's lawyers sent a takedown notice. The video stayed up. The rumors about Danny himself were relentless. He had been arrested. He was selling unlicensed CBD supplements on Fox News. The FBI had raided his bar. He was battling a serious illness that he was hiding from everyone. Each story was louder than the last, and none of them had a shred of evidence. In a rare interview, Danny said he found it genuinely surreal, watching fabricated versions of his own life spread as fact, with nothing he could legally do to stop it fast enough. His lawyers told him not to engage. Responding to lies gives them oxygen. Let the court record, speak. Danny followed that advice, even when following it was excruciating. The court record does not trend on social media, but the deepfakes, arrest rumor, and CBD story did. None of it stopped. The real-world cost was not abstract. Count's Vamped Rock Bar and Grill had been running on West Sahara Avenue since 2009, 6,000 square feet, where members of Pantera and Black Sabbath had played. And for 16 years, it had been the beating heart of Las Vegas rock culture. And it began to feel the pressure. Sponsors pulled back. Partnership conversations stalled. Corey said it plainly. Things had not worked out with potential new partners. Whether the noise from the internet was the cause or just the backdrop, the result was the same. After 16 years, they made the call. The final show was June 28, 2025. Count's 77 headlined. The room was sold out. Confetti fell from the ceiling while the band played. The building went on the market for $4.3 million. To the tabloids, the closure was the confirmation they had been waiting for. The empire was crumbling, the Count was done, and not one of them drove to the east side of Las Vegas to check. Count's Customs had never closed for a single day. So while the internet was writing his ending, what was Danny actually doing inside that garage every morning? And what had he been quietly building that no one outside those walls had any idea about? After the cameras left. The last episode of Counting Cars aired on December 1st, 2021. It was called Danny's Dream Benz. In it, Danny finally restored his late father's 1982 Mercedes-Benz 500 SEC AMG, a car that had been sitting in storage for nearly 30 years. Not because Danny forgot it was there, not because he was waiting for the right parts. He had been waiting until he was ready. That final episode, the very last thing the show ever broadcast, was a son finishing a project that had been waiting since the day his father died. The crew got the Benz running again, Danny took it out, and he did not say much on camera. The show began with Danny chasing cars. It ended with Danny and his dead father's Mercedes, engine running for the first time in 3 decades. And everything that happened after the cameras stopped was Danny doing what he had always been doing, finishing what his father started. While content farms were publishing headlines about his arrest and collapse, the lifts at Count's Customs were carrying the weight of active projects every single day. In October 2025, Danny took his crew to SEMA, the largest automotive trade show in North America. The shop's Instagram documented every moment of it. In February 2025, Danny donated a fully restored 1978 Lincoln Continental, 14,000 original miles, brought back entirely by the Count's Customs crew, to Steven Tyler's Janie's Fund, a charity supporting young victims of abuse and neglect. It sold at the Los Angeles Gala for $300,000. In February 2026, he did it again, a 1962 Cadillac Coupe de Ville 175. Nearly $500,000 raised for abused children from inside the same garage the tabloids had spent years declaring dead. And Ryan, the man whose face had been put in a fake orange jumpsuit and shown to millions of people, was still there. Still the lead painter. Still showing up every morning and laying down finishes that stopped people mid-sentence. Danny addressed it directly in a rare public interview. The rumor was horrible. It was completely false, and Ryan had been with him for 25 years. The personal garage attached to the shop held more than 50 cars and 70 motorcycles. Among them, the 1966 Mustang GT350 Danny's father had bought when Danny was still a child, and the 1932 Ford Roadster he has called the crown jewel of the collection. None of it was going anywhere or for sale. The cameras had gone, but the tourists still came. And then, in the spring of 2026, something went live from inside those garage walls that no network had greenlit, no producer had approved, and no tabloid had seen coming. He just kept building. On March 31st, 2026, Danny launched Count's Culture from inside Count's Customs, a podcast and vodcast produced by ITV America, shot in a studio built into the same garage walls where all of this had played out. The format was stripped to the bone. Danny, a guest, a real conversation, no script. The early guests included Eddie Trunk, one of the most trusted voices in rock music, Randy Couture, the mixed martial arts champion who built a post-spotlight career entirely on his own terms, and Bruce Kulick, lead guitarist for Kiss during some of the most commercially successful years in the band's history, along with Horny Mike, the same Mike who had argued with Danny on television for 9 seasons and who showed up to the podcast exactly as he always had been. Count's Culture was not trying to recreate counting cars. No restoration deadlines, no manufactured tension. Just Danny in a room with someone interesting, talking about cars, music, and whatever else came up. For the first time in a long time, no one was deciding which version of Danny made better television. Network conversations were active throughout 2025 and into 2026, and Danny had made it clear he was open to returning to television, on his own terms this time. Count's Culture was not a placeholder while those talks played out. Danny Sr. started a television station in Minneapolis in the early 1980s because he had something to say, and no one was handing him airtime. He built another in Las Vegas in 1989. His son had been watching that his whole life. The financial picture told the same story. A net worth estimated at $15 million by industry trackers, built across television, music, custom car restoration, and the Count's Tattoo Company, which he co-runs with Vince Neil. The land under the former Vamped building, purchased for over $2 million at the peak of counting cars, is now listed for sale at $4.3 million. The tabloids called him a broken man. The numbers disagreed. For 9 seasons, fans theorized about the bandana. They assumed he was hiding a scar or a tattoo. The truth is simpler than any of that. He was managing male pattern baldness, and Danny has simply never thought it needed an announcement. That is the whole story. A man comfortable enough with who he is that he never felt the need to explain himself. Not about the bandana, and not about anything else. The cameras found Danny Koker in that garage in 2008. They pointed at him for 9 seasons. Then they left. And when they were gone, he was still there. Same garage, same hands, same bandana. Still working. Still finishing things his father left behind. And somewhere in that garage, there is still a car that has not been touched. Not because Danny cannot restore it. Because some things, when you finally get to them, you want to get exactly right. And Danny Koker is still waiting for that day. If Joseph Frontiera had never stolen from that shop, do you think Counting Cars would still be on the air today? Or was it already running out of road before the fraud even started? And the final episode of Counting Cars was Danny finishing his dead father's car. So here is the real question. Do you think Danny was ever actually making a TV show? Or has he been building a memorial the whole time, and we just happened to be watching? Share your thoughts with us in the comments section. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also, click the next video showing on your screen. You will enjoy it.